morning, everyone, and welcome to our backyard. This morning I'm going to give a salvia update. As you probably know, I am a huge salvia fan, and earlier this year I did a couple of videos on salvia because I really view this as my go-to plant in the garden. So I'm going to take you around and just talk about the salvia really almost 8 months now into its growth cycle. And down here in zone 9A in the Houston area, we have a really long growing period. And so as a pollinator gardener, salvia just really is a wonderful plant for the yard. I had some successes and some failures with the salvia this year, but we had an extreme summer. Not to go into detail, but we had massive heat throughout the summer, and it was uncharacteristic. It set all kinds of records. And when we had prolonged periods of over 100 degrees with high humidity, a lot of plants suffered, and so I'll talk about that as I go through them. But the first one I want to talk about, which has been such a standout in the garden, has been Mystic Spires. And I know a lot of you just love Mystic Spires as your favorite. I have this in a planter, actually, and it's just been growing and prolifically flowering. And Mystic Spires is just one of those salvias that is tough and just flowers gorgeously. It has tons of pollinators, especially native pollinators, native bees on it all throughout the day. And I will plant more Mystic Spires salvia in my yard. I only have 2 plants, and that's this one and then the one that I will show you a little bit later in what I call my north bed. But it's a beautiful purple flower. It's got the green foliage, and it worked like a champ this summer. I had it in, it's still considered full sun, but it gets afternoon shade from the super hot part of the day from really 3 to 4 o'clock on, and so that was a good spot for it this year. All right, on to my next salvia. And this salvia is called Salvia madrensis. It's in my shade garden, and it's October 21st, and fall is when this salvia just really shines. It's a tall salvia, and it's a unique salvia. It's just starting to now get its flower spikes. I'm gonna get this one here, see if I can focus on this. There we go. And this flower is a beautiful yellow flower on gorgeous long spikes. These spikes can get to be 2 feet tall, and the fall is really when this salvia shines. It's blooming a little bit later this year, but I'm very happy with its started recovery. You can see the leaf is just a really unique leaf. They're large. The texture is very interesting. And this is a salvia from the mountains in Mexico. And so it's kind of a little bit difficult for me to get. I usually can only get it once a year at my favorite nursery in the Houston area. And I just really like it because it's a fall performing salvia, and it's yellow, and there's not that many salvias that do flower yellow. It did get stressed by our summer heat, even though this was in the shade. And I mentioned this before. This was heat stress, and these are lower leaves on the salvia, but it survived, and it is now starting to create the flower spikes. It's a little bit late for hummingbird migration, unfortunately, but this was such a unique year. I've got a couple of salvias here that I replaced. I was able to get those earlier this summer. And they do grow quite tall. These stalks are very much salvia-like stalks. They're, squares. They look like a stalk of celery somewhat, but it's just a very unique salvia. And I love this one for the shade bed and also for the colors of the bloom spikes. This flowered last year, huge 2 feet yellow blooms that our hummingbirds and bees and butterflies visited daily right up until our late December freeze last year. And so when most of my other salvias have kind of pooped out, this salvia is just a really stellar performer in the fall garden. So I've been very, very pleased with this. Okay, next one. As you can see, this is what I call my north bed. And this is a bush salvia. This bush salvia is called Maraschino, which is a hybrid of the Salvia grigii. And it blooms a very red color. It's a pretty bloom. And it typically doesn't do a whole lot of blooming over the summer, but this summer in particular was pretty tough on it. It did not like our excessive heat, but it's rebounding. It will die to the ground in a frost, and so I will cut this back. This was cut back from pretty much the ground last year, so this is the growth that it's had this year, and you can see of all these branches that are defoliated because of our summer, but it's starting to come back right now. And I love the smell of the leaves on this salvia. They smell so nice. This flower is visited also. Pollinators love this particular salvia, and I'm really glad that it's starting to rebound again here and do a little bit of flowering. So in my north bed, I have my second Mystic Spires, and it did flop. You can see here it did flop, and I just did not trim it over when it flopped because it has these gorgeous bloom spikes. These calyxes are always just covered in flowers, even though it's low to the ground like this. The pollinators still come. It's just a huge hit. So I've decided, because of the success that Mystic Spires had and our heat, I am going to have more Mystic Spires. I do like the look of this salvia more than our native, and I'm going to show you our native in a minute. So Mystic Spires is a definite plus has been a plus in my garden, and I do want to plant more. The one behind it here, let me get back here. So the salvia that I didn't plant well is called Misty, and this is a smaller version of Mystic Spires, and it also had flopped. It has the gorgeous bloom spikes like Mystic Spires, but it doesn't get as tall, and I planted those more in the center of the bed, which was not a great choice. But this plant in the front of a border would do very, very well. And I do like Mysty. I like Mysty Spires a little bit better because I don't have a lot of application or a lot of places that I want to put it in the front of a border. But I do want to say this was a very, very good performer this summer also. So our native salvia to Texas is Salvia farinaceae. And this salvia did well, I should say stellar, in the inferno that we had this summer. And it pretty much just self-seeded itself. The interesting thing about this salvia is I've had some white Salvia farinaceae sprout, and I don't know if this was carried in or this was just from my Salvia farinaceae that I had here on the end. I had 3 little plants and they've pretty much self-seeded. They're in my pots. I'm going to come to the front, and they've just self-seeded all over the place. This was a pot that I had of Supertunia Vista bubblegum, and this salvia has just taken over. It's self-seeded itself, and this particular salvia is such a hit with all the pollinators. I do like how it is performed in the garden this year. Back in my south garden here has been a particular challenge, and all this Salvia farinaceae was planted in the ground, and I only had 3 plants over on this side, and they self-seeded this summer very successfully, and they're all throughout the bed. They're coming up all throughout the bed, and I really like how this is performing this way, and so I've decided I am going to continue to have this Salvia farinaceae in my garden. I don't particularly like the foliage on it. I think the Mystic Spires foliage is so much nicer, but Mystic Spires, one of the parent plants is this Salvia farinaceae, and so I can see why Mystic Spires did so good, because this one was stellar in the garden this year. I did lose my April Nights salvia. It just couldn't take our summer this year. This was one of the original salvias that I had planted, and it just didn't do well. I had planted 2, and I lost the prior one during a winter freeze, and I lost this one during our summer heat. And so I probably won't use this type of salvia again. This was a good test. Extreme heat and super cold weather, and which ones performed for us. So my Salvia Amistad is such a stellar performer in my garden. I absolutely love this flower. I love the calyx. I love what it looks like. I love what it grows to. This is a Granitica type salvia, and I had very poor luck this year in our extreme heat with the Granitica types. My salvia that was established on Amistad did okay, except I did have this loss, and this is huge, and this was in full sun, brutal, and it just did not like its life. It is on drip irrigation, and so the salvia did have enough water, but this one just took the brunt, and I've mentioned that. My other two Granitica types were Hummingbird Falls. I lost both of those, and a hybrid Granitica from Proven Winners called Rockin Fuchsia, and I lost 3 of those. And so the Graniticas, I do believe, do not like the high heat, or I should say extreme heat, because we had a record-breaking summer. Extreme heat they didn't like, and very high humidity. And I think that combination just really, really caused a lot of stress. The salvia that did better was, interestingly, its cousin called Amante. And this is this hot pink salvia with this gorgeous hot pink calyx. And this salvia for me, I mentioned this earlier, I should have cut this back and I didn't. I won't make that mistake again. I will be cutting my salvia back. So Amante did okay. And these are probably my two favorite salvias, the Amistad and the Amante or Amante. And I do want to say, I don't think this is dead because I do see some growth and some sprouting, and I do see a little bit of green, so I'm not going to pull this out. This is just, it's second or third year, and I love what it does. So if it's going to come back from the ground, I want to encourage that. So Salvia Amistad and Amante, even though I did have issues this summer with the Granitica type salvias, I just will have these in my garden every year. I'm on the front side of this same garden bed, and I really like how the salvia pokes through with this Greg mist flower all amongst it. This is a huge hit. I've seen monarch butterflies now come through because we are having the migration, and they love this bed, this garden bed with the lantana, the Greg's mist flower, the salvia. This has been a huge hit this week with monarchs and painted ladies and pipevine swallowtails and a lot of different types of butterflies. So that's been a lot of fun. So even though my my Amistad isn't flowering prolifically, it is flowering, and I do like the effect. Okay, next one. And this is my Salvia Leucantha, or Mexican bush sage, and I absolutely also love this salvia. It has a very interesting flower. The calyx is interesting. It has a purple flower with a white throat to it. This is pretty much done. I'm starting to get new growth down at the base. Oh, I've got a hummingbird here. She likes to come visit my flowers every day. So there's a lot of new growth popping up at the base, and so I probably should come and trim the tops off of this. But I do like even though it's a weak purple at the moment, I do like the look of the Salvia Leucantha throughout here. So this is one of the pretty blooms from the little prettier. I thought I wanted to show you what that looks like. Oops, I didn't mean. Sorry about this. I didn't mean to focus in like that. One of the plants was hitting the camera and it was zooming in. But this Salvia Leucantha has a beautiful purple calyx, and then the blooms come out into those white blossoms. It's such a pretty bloom. I really like this flower also in the garden. So I will link up at the top the other two videos that I did throughout the year of the salvia and how it was performing in the garden. And I don't know if I necessarily have a favorite Salvia because I have them that perform beginning in the spring. And then I also have this Salvia that starts performing now with an unusual yellow flower late in the fall. And on into the winter, really, until you get that first frost. So last year we didn't freeze until, I think it was December 23rd or 24th. So we had flowers of Salvia, golly, all throughout the year, except once that froze, then it stopped. So Salvia is just this gorgeous workhorse. I love Salvia in the garden. You know, looking back, there's certain Salvias that I'm probably not going to continue to purchase just because of the performance in our extreme heat and how they did not do well. But the ones that I showed you today just performed well down here along the Gulf Coast in Zone 9A. And I love Salvia. Some of you have mentioned in your comments salvias that you really like that are doing well in your gardens. I'm going to be looking at planting seeds, maybe some annuals, just because they are such pollinator hits. So curious now that we've gone through a whole growing season. I know down here we're still in our growing season. But what are some salvias that are just stellar workhorses in your gardens? Share in the comments because I'm really interested to try some new varieties. Keep my ones that I have, but try and incorporate some new. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. I hope you all have a wonderful day today, and I hope to see you again.